Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news, trends, and hottest topics that focus on advances in cybersecurity and cyber industry economics. Our expert yet down-to-earth hosts make cybersecurity straightforward. They ask the tough questions and make this challenging topic something that everyone can understand. Our candid approach lets guests open up on topics we would all like to see addressed. You can find us on the web at newcyberfrontier.com. That's www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join today's host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Hello, this is Abe Tompson with the new Cyber Frontier. Today we have as our special guest the CEO and founder of Stealth Mode, cybersecurity firm. And is it Roselle? Did I say it right?
Yes, you did.
It is a delight to have you on the program with us, Roselle Safran, right? So welcome to the show. How's things?
Thank you. Yeah, everything is very busy.
Yeah.
In a unique way these days.
Indeed, Indeed, it's easy enough to stay busy, at least for me, and I think in our industry, definitely even at this time. So welcome. Good to have you with us. How did you get to this point? I'm excited for our guests to kind of hear a little bit about your story because you've got some cool stuff in your background. So, but how'd you get here? Talk a little bit about your journey and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so I've had quite an interesting and exciting journey in cybersecurity. So back in 2004, I was looking for a job and I saw a posting for something that sounded really interesting, working as a computer crime investigator. And the job entailed computer forensics, internet investigations, nothing that I had any background in whatsoever. But it sounded fascinating. So I said, you know what? I'm going to apply and I'm going to try to convince the hiring manager that I'll learn on the job because I was confident I could do that.
Yep.
And I was able to convince the hiring manager and I learned on the job and I earned a certification in computer forensics while I was on the job, had some amazing experiences, had a great mentor that helped with getting me up to speed on some of it. And then I was kind of off and running at that point. I mean, once I had a computer forensics background, computer forensics certification, I've never had trouble getting a job since.
Sure.
And so back then in 2004, cybersecurity, computer forensics was not a known term.
Yeah.
And when I would tell people that's what I did, they heard forensics and thought there were dead bodies involved. It was just very different from today.
Yeah.
Where now you talk about cybersecurity and it's a topic everyone knows or at least understands to an extent. But back when I started, I never would have expected that to be the case.
Right.
It was kind of a backwater IT issue at that point. And I always thought it would kind of stay that way and be pretty obscure. But that has obviously changed quite a bit. And I was working computer forensics roles for a number of years. And you could take computer forensics down a couple different paths. So I was originally doing civil cases. There are also law enforcement cases. And then the other big area is, of course, cybersecurity. And I eventually went squarely down the cybersecurity path when I moved to the Department of Homeland Security.
Sure.
And there I was at the division that was then called U.S. CERT.
Mm-hmm.
That's now, I guess, part of CISA.
Yeah.
And so there I was managing malware and forensic analysis teams and also doing some entrepreneur activities because I was the product owner for what was a threat intelligence platform before the term threat intel platform even existed.
And now there's classes on it.
Exactly. But this was over 10 years ago.
Sure.
So it was a very new concept. And so in that experience of building out a product from my idea to something that was being used by the entire organization and also other federal government agencies, that was a great experience in learning that whole process and also really got me even more interested in entrepreneurship than I already was.
Sure.
And then from the Department of Homeland Security, I moved to the Executive Office of the President. And this was during the Obama administration. I always make that clear these days. And there I was managing all of the cybersecurity operations for the 24/7 SOC, and just basically defending the network that's used by the White House and the rest of the agency. Needless to say, that was an amazing job. Very, very intense job. Yeah. I don't think there was a night where I wasn't at least on email, if not on the phone, at around midnight or 1 a.m. And I just developed this bad habit of always checking my email at any time of day, because you always wanted to keep tabs of what was going on.
Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
Yeah. And then between those experiences at Department of Homeland Security and the Executive Office of the President, I developed a good understanding of where there were some shortcomings in how cybersecurity operations worked, and where there were technology gaps that weren't being filled. And there was one in particular where I saw the security team struggling to keep up with alerts, because they were basically starting from scratch with each alert, and they weren't able to use the prior knowledge from similar cases or the threat intelligence that was relevant. And so I came up with this idea, which became my first cybersecurity startup. That was at Uplevel Security, and it was essentially an incident response platform that pulled together alert data and incident response, that alert data and threat intelligence data onto one platform. So when an alert came in, there was already lots of context behind it.
Sure.
And that was a great experience. That company was eventually sold to McAfee. Yeah. I left after a few years and went to work for one of the investors who had invested in the company. And there I was the entrepreneur in residence. And that was a very interesting experience, because I had a chance to see the other side of the table. Yeah. So at Uplevel Security, I was the founder, CEO, very much on the operational side, and of course pitching to investors. And so then when I switched to being on the investor side, then I had a better perspective of what the mentality was, and what some of the challenges were in how I approached it when I was on the founder side. And so I spent time there learning the investor side, and at that point developed an even higher bar for what I thought would be successful, because I understood at that point both sides of it. And I took some time to figure out a new startup, because once you have the entrepreneurial bug, it's really tough to shake it. And so I ended up spending lots of time coming up with ideas that I thought were brilliant, and then running them by other people and finding I was the only one that thought they were brilliant. And then eventually I came across one that other people agreed had some great potential. And so that is what I'm pursuing now.
Excellent.
And that company is called Key Caliber, still in stealth mode. And but I could talk a little bit about what we're doing.
Sure.
And yeah, so it's very exciting to be back in the game on the entrepreneurial side. My timing is impeccable. Yeah. With all the craziness going on with COVID-19.
Sure.
But we're plugging away regardless.
Yeah, and we're not going anywhere, that's for sure. And that's activity still creeping up. And I just I read somewhere that defense here in Colorado Springs, in particular, defense and particularly cyber contracts really haven't slowed too much. There's still, the HR hangups and things like that. But yeah, just like we thought, we'll now say pre-COVID, it's gonna be the same way. Our industry is going to thrive, and not because we want to create a little, unique niche for ourselves, but we want to help. We want to protect, we want to defend. And kind of neat though too, you now understand what the investor is thinking about and looking for, which is fantastic, to have that balance in your story, for sure. So yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about what you're up to now, and what you're hoping to make of this new opportunity that you're in?
Yeah. So with my last startup, I was focused very much on the needs of the security team. With this one, I'm focusing more on the needs of the security leader, the security executive. Good. So if you look at the responsibilities of a security executive, it's basically striking the right balance between risk and controls.
Yeah.
And as straightforward as that sounds, that's incredibly difficult. And part of why it's so difficult is because traditionally the approach has entailed looking at the entire enterprise, the entire organization, as one big monolith. And that's really not accurate. I mean, any enterprise is so complex, completely heterogeneous.
Matrixed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And constantly changing. And to look at it as just this one static block and say, okay, here's my risk around it. Here's this one score that defines the entire enterprise. It's not accurate and it's not helpful.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is saying, all right, we're going to take a step back for a second here, because you can't look at everything the same way and you can't resource everything the same way. So let's look at what the mission critical assets are.
Yeah.
So we can focus very squarely on that and devote our resources and our attention to that. And in that process, to the extent that people are doing that today, they're usually calling in a consulting company and saying, all right, spend 3 months and figure this out. And the consulting company conducts a bunch of interviews and questionnaires, and at the end of the day has this big clunky spreadsheet and says, okay, here's what your mission critical assets are. And it's this one snapshot in time that's super subjective.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is taking a data-driven approach. So we have the data, we have the data science. Let's bring this whole process into the 21st century. And so we take data from the security stack, so network data, application or asset data that's already being generated. And then we apply machine learning, graph theory, statistics, a number of different computations on it to figure out what the mission critical assets are.
Sure.
And then once you have that, then you can figure out the risk profile around that specific asset. And you can figure out how you're protecting it and how you need to protect it. And so figuring out the ROI for what you already have in place becomes evident. And developing a roadmap becomes clear, and there's a purpose behind it.
Sure.
And so that's what we're doing.
So how do you kind of define what I'm sure you'd call it your cybersecurity return on investment? How do you juxtapose variables there?
Well, so we do look at the risk from a dollars perspective.
Sure.
So we do some calculations to look at the impact and the loss event frequency, and do come up with values. So we can basically do a diff between if you had nothing in place and comparing that to what you have now, you can see from a dollars and cents perspective what the change in risk is.
Sure.
And once you have that, then compare that with the amount of money you're spending on the technologies.
Yeah.
To get the ROI. But doing that on an asset by asset level gives you that granularity to see really how well you are instrumenting your environment where it matters most.
What levers you can pull and how effective you can be. And I presume that is very welcome to the client when you can speak business, very directly. It doesn't become this scary cybersecurity beast over here. It's, hey, we speak business. And I would assume too that really resonates with, I think, what's happening in our industry now, with this desire to not just be over in our stovepipe, but to be fluidly representative across every aspect of that business, logistics, production, etc.
Yeah, because that's where we need to be.
Of course, yeah.
Historically, we've been seen as the Department of No. And that's unfortunately the case, and we can't operate like that. That's not going to be effective for anybody.
No.
And so we have to be coming at it from the angle of, okay, how can we best be a business enabler?
Sure.
Not a hindrance to business operations, but an enabler.
Yeah, indeed.
And so with what we're building, we're looking at it from the perspective of, okay, as a security leader, you need to be able to make that case, to have some defensibility around what you're presenting, and to articulate how you are providing value and how that value actually maps to business operations.
Sure. Let's take a break and hear from our sponsor.
Sure.
And we're back, the new cyber frontier. Our guest is Roselle Safran, quite an entrepreneur, great background, great experience, and plenty of really relevant discussion this fine day. So we were just kind of talking about speaking in terms that clients can understand and infusing ourselves across an organization. What's on the horizon? What's next? You've been in it. You've been in the trenches. What do you see coming that maybe everybody else doesn't?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question.
You're welcome.
So I see lots more of the same, but I certainly see, and this has been my concern for years, is more of a movement towards disruption and destruction. So back 10 years ago, when we were working on this, the main concern, for the most part, was theft of intellectual property, or just some sort of breach where data was taken. And that's basically where the impacts stop. Nowadays, certainly with ransomware or DDoS attacks, you see that there is a move towards disruption and ransomware destruction. And so that's really a concern, because I remember when I had my first cybersecurity startup, and I was pitching to investors on the need for cybersecurity, because this was before cybersecurity was a mainstream topic. And I would talk about the repercussions and discuss the financial impact of financial data being stolen, the impact of intellectual property being stolen. And then at the bottom, I would say, and there's disruption and destruction too. I'd throw that in there because but it really wasn't that much of a threat at that point. Yeah, it still was, but not on the same level that it is now. Whereas now there are legitimate concerns around this disruption aspect, and certainly the destruction aspect. And when you look at ICS or any type of critical infrastructure, and how vulnerable it is, cybersecurity standpoint, that's pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
So I think, with any arms race, and this is basically an arms race,
absolutely.
there's this constant escalation. And so I see, while we are improving our game, the attackers are going to improve their game and take it in directions that are going to be even more detrimental.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of issue that keeps us cybersecurity folks up at night.
Well, and fortunately, though, it sounds like we're getting to a point where we can have others join us staying up at night, because more and more the customer base is beginning to understand the relevance and the criticality.
Yes. So that's definitely improving, and that's something that's occurred sort of in tandem with the topic becoming more mainstream.
Sure.
So now you have boards that are asking for this information and demanding, like, someone with cybersecurity experience to be reporting to them. And that is a very key component to cybersecurity getting to a point where it gets the level of attention it deserves.
Yeah.
It's now, cyber risk is considered one of the top risks for businesses today. And that certainly wasn't the case 10 years ago. And you have boards that are demanding, they want to know, what are the mission critical assets and what are the vulnerabilities to them and what is it going to take to protect them?
Well, we want those boards to take ownership like that. It's about time, because as you know, things don't move unless there's a power voice that's joining our chorus, and so that's good. And the greater reality for that leadership component is that they're the ones on the hook anyway. You can only blame the CISO for so long.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so, board CEOs, they can't turn a blind eye to cybersecurity these days.
Yeah.
And that's certainly helpful for our industry, because unless we have that tone from the top saying, look, you need to be spending resources on this. This needs to be an area of focus. Unless that happens, it's not going to permeate down to the rest of the company.
Sure.
So there's definitely good movement in that direction. Is it keeping up with the level of threat? That's a different discussion.
Yeah.
But at least it's moving in the right direction. There's the right trajectory of acceptance and acknowledgement that yes, we do need to devote considerable resources to it.
And if we're not going to keep up with the threat, maybe it's a new agile mindset in general. Just staying flexible. Staying as informed as possible, but also staying agile and flexible. And I guess that too is going to require some leadership intervention. So with your current startup, how are you engaging the market? How do you get the business going?
Yeah, well, so that's sort of the secret sauce for most founders.
Okay, it's just you and I. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so I have been in this industry for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And so when I was evaluating ideas, what I was doing first and foremost was talking to potential customers and getting their opinion on it. Sure. And so with many of the other ideas I had come up with, I would ask for opinions, and the opinions were basically along the lines of, no, that's not going to get anywhere. But with this current one, it was completely different. Cool. And I just heard time and time again that was a great idea. That was something that was not being done in any shape or form by any other technology that was out there. So the initial people who I spoke to are now the people that are saying, all right, you have a product ready now. I want to start using it. And so it's sort of this grassroots effort, essentially, where you start with some early adopters,
Yeah.
and they see the value, and once they see the value, then it's easy to explain that to the next person, and then also they become advocates.
Sure.
Because
Oh yeah.
they're happy with the product, and everyone talks to
Sure.
their peers in
Of
this
course.
industry. So that's another way, and so yeah, it's helpful that we are in a space where we're providing something that's just revolutionary compared to what's out there now.
Sure. Well, that's exciting.
An approach versus like 3 months of manual efforts. It makes a big difference, and everyone can understand that automation, that continuous analysis that provides the answers they need, that's really meaningful to their operations.
Sure. Well, and several years ago, I went on an executive tour at Google, and what was really kind of fun and sort of the most memorable part of the tour for me, other than the free juice and Birkenstocks and bicycles that were all over the place, but the interesting thing was when we heard from the chief of innovation, and he said, "It's so funny. Here's this major conglomerate, this major organization," and he said he coined a term called pretotyping. So instead of prototyping, pretotyping, and basically what they would do is when they'd invent a new app or tool or capability, he would map out a quick picture of what the app might look like on a sticky, and then he'd give it to a prospective user, and he'd say, every time that you might feel like you'd need to use this function, I want you just to make a tick mark on a piece of paper. And this idea of pretotyping saved all this money because they would find out what idea had magnetism, what idea was going to explode, and they hadn't even really built the app yet. And it was merely just the sense of quantifying the need. And it sounds like, similar to what you've done. You've gone out there and you've heard enough opinion on this that it's going to be explosive. And so this is really working for you. Exciting.
Yeah. I like that technique though.
Yeah, isn't that cool? That's something I'll take away from my executive tour of Google was that concept of pretotyping. And so revolutionary, right? Already you're in the industry that is probably, as many have said, the most revolutionary since the Industrial Revolution. Would you agree that that's where we are?
I think IT certainly is that next phase of an industrial revolution, and to that end, I think one issue that's really lacking from a federal government perspective is having a department or agency that is squarely devoted to information technology. And within that, cybersecurity should be one of the primary components. And so I think that's something that even some states have a department of IT, and certainly many other countries do.
Colorado does, for sure.
Yeah, many do. But on a federal level, we don't have that. And if you think about that for a second, it doesn't make a ton of sense. So we have a Department of Agriculture. We used to be an agrarian society. Mm-hmm. That absolutely made sense. And frankly, we still need it now. We absolutely still need it now. But we also need to evolve the cabinet to include the departments that are absolutely prevalent and necessary for society today. And sure. I don't think anything falls more squarely into that category than information technology.
Because obviously you've got silos. You've got defense with Cyber Command, and then you've got, like I had on the Assistant Secretary of Energy for Cybersecurity as one of our guests some months ago. So you've got silos all over the place. But yeah, it's an interesting concept. You're now, even with your title at the White House Cyber Chief, how close to the table did you get?
Yeah, there are lots of layers.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was certainly not advising the president.
Right.
It was like,
Well, because even, White House comms off, WACA and things like that, but they're all kind of outside that inner ring. That is interesting. Bringing that, that information leader to the table. And honestly, if you're going to bring IT, you better bring cybersecurity because they're two distinct disciplines, right? So really, you're talking almost about two chairs at that table eventually.
yeah, yeah.
Secretary
They
of
go hand in
Information.
hand,
Yeah.
and you kind of can't have one without the other.
Now, the only thing I would kind of think out loud about though is one of the things we've been trying to do is integrate ourselves across all of industry, right? And so, would there be any danger of that singular IT person just becoming another stovepipe?
No, I don't think so. I think you create some uniformity
Sure.
and some consistency
Mhm.
that then has to, and you create that vertically, but
Yeah.
then that has to spread horizontally.
Sure. And then there's a belly button for for executive leadership and whatnot to say, okay, boom, you got this, go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
even the departments have it. They've got their belly button internally, but there's no chief tech or cybersecurity person. That's interesting. Cool.
And-
See, you're entrepreneurial ideas now. You should have copywritten that, but now that I know.
Really.
Awesome. Well, Roselle, this has been amazing, and I'm sure that we'll want to have you back again to continue this conversation. But I just want to sincerely thank you for this time and for honoring us here on New Cyber Frontier.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
Awesome.
You come back anytime.
Wonderful. This is Abe Tompson on the New Cyber Frontier. Good day.
Thank you for listening to New Cyber Frontier. Remember to follow or like our post and circulate each new show to your networks. We keep you informed, bring you the latest news, explore new trends, and find the hottest topics. With New Cyber Frontier, you don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert, just get plugged in. We encourage you to get involved. Tell us what topics interest you and join our mailing lists. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. That's newcyberfrontier.com. Check out our previous interviews and please let us know if there are any topics that you would like to hear discussed. See you next time on New Cyber Frontier.